not get the UARB to approve the petition, who pays their expenses? So again, that would depend on who's involved in a process. So if it's one unit, one applicant that has filed for amalgamation, and there's no one else involved, and it doesn't go anywhere, then yes, it would be the applicant that would bear the costs. Typically, that's a good question. I mean, typically,
What was the question?
the question was if there was a group of people that applied for amalgamation, you had your 10% or 17%, whatever the number is, and it wasn't approved by the board, so you went through the process and they said it's not the right thing to do, who would bear the cost? And then more specifically was, if it was, who specifically? Is it the individuals that signed the petition, or is it the group? So basically, it wouldn't, because you signed a petition doesn't make you responsible for the cost of the study. So it would be, so if a group, there's a group that's working to get the signatures, and a group submitted that application, it would be the responsibility of the group.
It's up to the UARB ultimately, though, is it not?
It is up to the UARB, and again, it depends on what parties are involved. So if there's only one party that is filed, then it's only one party that can pay.
Okay, because when I read it, I didn't read it that way. I just read that it was up to the UARB.
It is. It is.
It didn't specify that only the applicant when I read it.
No, absolutely, but so it's up to the UARB, but if there's no other parties at the table, then they can't necessarily enforce the cost on other parties.
Thank you, Council, resident of West Hants, my entire life. I thought I heard you say here earlier tonight that just because the residents or the town applies for amalgamation, the UARB doesn't have to necessarily choose that route. They can choose regional government and/or dissolution instead.
Yeah, I mean, technically they could. So if they would look at options. So again, in the Ivey, where there was, the disagreement as to the way to proceed, what actually happened, so the town applied to annex, the county kind of sent in a counter application, which was to amalgamate. What the board declared is that you should amalgamate based on a plebiscite. The plebiscite came back inconclusive, and basically nothing happened. So the board does have the authority to say, well, we think that this is the best option as opposed to this.
I understand that the provincial government has provided a certain amount of funds to the transport dissolution thing for infrastructure or whatever. Is there any advantage over dissolution as far as provincial money is concerned compared to amalgamation? Would the provincial government be more readily to put more funds in over one over the other?
I would say, again, I don't write the checks. That decision is made by the government. I would say typically not. I mean, if there's parties that are looking at a governance change, again, we'll work with them on the letter of intent to help determine what that funding would look like. So it's one way or another, there would be support. I just got one here. If the citizens group is the applicant, where do they get the money to pay for the application process? So again, I think that would depend on whether or not there's other parties involved. If there's other parties involved, then it would depend on what the board determines as to who pays the cost.
Paul Beasley, in the town of Windsor. I'd like to thank Rob and I saw Mark Peck back here too, so there are municipal advisors, and they do a great job for us, so thank you all. And I want to thank Jennifer and Paul for having this session, and Jennifer in particular, because sorry, Paul, but Jennifer started this a long time ago. But I'm glad you're here. A question, I just want clarification because, you know, I hear some questions being asked with sort of in the negative. What if someone does not want? What if all four parties, the citizens of the town of Windsor, the citizens of the municipality of West Hants, the municipality of West Hants, and the town of Windsor, all say we want to do this? What is the likely outcome? That's my first question, and I'll have another question.
I would say the likely outcome would be very positive that would happen.
Question number two, because I know it's on everybody's mind, it's what I hear all the time: my taxes are going to double. In the recent examples, has there been a negative aberration or impact on taxes going through the process in the rural municipalities? Has there been a negative in the towns? Has there been positives? And I've spoken with the warden of the municipality of Cumberland, along with the CAO, so I know what's happened in Spring Hill, and I know what's happened in the rural municipality. But what have you seen as far as taxes? Is there likely to be a aberration in what we're paying now?
Yeah, so again, each of them has been a little bit different. There's so many factors, as you know, Paul, when it comes to taxes. It's hard to say. It's, you know, definitely has been, you know, going back to Canso. So it's hard to say that the taxes have changed in Guysborough, because Guysborough has all kinds of economic development happening and the natural gas happening and all that type of thing. So the taxes in Canso, people are paying less in taxes than they were. You know, in Hansport, the goal was stabilization. It did drop fairly significantly in Spring Hill. There hasn't been direct impact on rural municipalities as far as their taxes changing in any of those cases.
Ron, first of all, not the man that tends to thank this fellow. But, thank you, sir. It's the first meeting I've been to in this area in 40 years. I'm a newbie, I've only been here 40 years now. That who's been knowledgeable, impartial, and answered every single question. And I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Time for one or two more questions before my bedtime. Sorry, I didn't see what you did.
Why did the rest of them?
Why do the rest of the big towns or be solved instead of amalgamated? Like, what's that, their decision? Was it who would be?
Well, all the dissolutions were the decision of the town, and they were all for different reasons. I mean, Cumberland's an interesting one, where Spring Hill dissolved. I mean, Spring Hill has a special set of circumstances with some of their financial things that they needed to look at. And in Cumberland, so there's also the town of Carsborough, Oxford, and Amherst. So to amalgamate or to dissolve is a decision of, you know, in the dissolution case, it has been a decision of the town, and the reasoning has been a little bit different in each case. Yeah, so it's a hard one to say for sure why did they do this instead of this, but typically it's been the decision of the town that that's what they felt was the best way to go.
I know it's hard without having the studies that are done, requested by the UARB, but Do you know of any reasons why amalgamation is not a good choice?
It is hard without the studies. You know, again, I think with any change, you need to have the facts and the information before you. And that's, I certainly hope that any municipality that wants to make a change wherever they are in Nova Scotia, that you get the figures in front of you, you look at the numbers, and you figure out what's best for your citizens, which is what we want all municipalities to be doing.
Is that a no? You don't really?
I can't say that I can't say that it's positive or I can't say that it's the right thing to do or the right thing to do. You need to have the facts. You need to have all the information in front of you, and then the council needs to make the decision.
So is the best way to get the true facts to go to the UARB?
That's certainly one option, yeah. So again, if you start a process and you go to the Utility Review Board, they will order the studies, all the studies will be done. If the Utility Review Board comes back and says, well, we've got all the studies and it's not the right thing to do, they won't order it.
Right, okay.
Can they change it from amalgamation to dissolution on their own?
Yeah, I was just wondering if the UARB had the power to, if they went for amalgamation and they decided, no, that's not the right thing, but dissolution is, and this is what's going to happen.
The board would have that authority, so again, if it depends, though, on who's involved. So if all the parties at the table are saying we want amalgamation, and you provide the evidence as to why that's the right option, then typically the board is going to, again, they make the decision, but if you provide all the information that says this is the right option, then typically the board will go along with that.
I just want to thank Jennifer and Paul for the work that Jennifer and Judd in organizing this, but I want to reassure Jennifer, she asked about the other 90%. I can assure you that all of us that are making rounds of door to door requests have received about 98% support. Everywhere we go, we have very rarely people say that no, they're not interested in doing this. So if you want to ask the other 90%, we can certainly do that. But there is nobody circulating a petition not to do this. So if there is a voice out there that's doesn't want to do this, then we should hear about it. So.
Rob, there's probably a lot of people that couldn't make it out here this evening. And I'm sure they would probably want this information. How would they be able to access this information if they have questions?
So certainly my presentation, I'll send to both municipal units. Hopefully they will share that on their website. I have cards up here. If anybody wants to take a card, certainly feel free to email me. It's the easiest way to get in touch. So certainly we'll try and make sure that the information is out there for anybody that wants to see it. Yeah, so I guess, again, I'll send it to municipal units. I know Colin's here. I'm sure he'll have an excellent article in the paper. And if you go to a municipal unit, I would hope that they'll give you a copy of the presentation. Or, yeah. Absolutely, I understand that. Okay, we've got two more questions. Over here, Paul, and back there. And then.
John Robinson, Newport Station. I was just wondering, you mentioned a lot of studies, and I was just wondering some examples of some studies that would be done.
So they look at the infrastructure, they look at the cost, they look at financial studies. So for example, they take the finances of one unit and another unit and blend them together to see what that might look like as one. They look at all the costs of the infrastructure, they look at the human resources to say, we have these positions and these positions, what would happen if you had a blended unit? There's quite a list. They look at our CP,
Fire, police,
everything.
all that.
Everything, every service that is provided would be reviewed in the board. Okay, one more question.
Good evening. I just had a question about the cost. I don't believe in the examples that you gave us there were any costs associated with amalgamation. The ones you gave, weren't they for dissolution?
In the examples, the scenarios,
Yeah, there was a question about tax rates and how they were affected. Weren't those examples for dissolution rather than amalgamation?
yes.
Yes, so do you have any examples of how tax rates are affected by amalgamation?
So there hasn't been a true amalgamation happen in the province, so we don't know exactly what the outcome would be.
Okay, and another question I had is, in my understanding from what you said earlier, that there can be a difference in the unit's responsibility for maintaining the town roads, depending on whether it's amalgamation or dissolution, is that correct?
It would basically stay the same in either scenario.
So you're saying that if it was dissolution, then the new unit would not get support from the provincial government for upkeep of the town roads?
So typically what's been happening, again, through the dissolution process and through the letter of intent, there has been funding provided to bring the roads to a certain level, and then there's been some ongoing maintenance costs through the dissolution process. So in the letter of intent, there's been a number that's been for any provincial road that runs through a town, there's been funding provided for that.
From the provincial government?
Yep.
Okay.
In the letter of intent.
Amalgamation, that would not happen?
It certainly could.
But, well, we haven't had it happen.
That's right.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're in. Question.
Ivey, West Hants. You said you didn't have any examples of what happens to taxes for amalgamation. But can you talk about what happened in Halifax and Cape Breton? Even though they were regional get-togethers?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a similar process. I mean, those two cases, certainly it wasn't necessarily their choice. It was a bit more of a force. The government came in and said, okay, we want to make one unit in this area. So in those cases, so there was talk briefly about Cape Breton. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but in those cases, there was a number of towns that did dissolve into the regional municipality, and there was some tax relief for those towns. So that's just thank you all for coming. It was great to see you.